And welcome into the program. This is your game plan for retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for a common sense approach to planning for your financial investment and retirement future. He is president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services. Chris McIntire here with us as your resource. Proactive planners, savers, investors. This is a program just for you, information, education, and today talking about retirement success. Chris, it's not a guessing game. We really need to plan this out if we hope to achieve it.
Yeah. We don't want to go on a hope and a prayer, if you will. You want to have a nice structure in place, and I think we'll probably liken some of this to, like how you build a house. You don't put the roof on it first. You lay the foundation, and the better the foundation is, you'll be able to weather some of the storms then and rebuild if you need to.
And we've also talked, Chris, about a number of the tools that are available to us here recently, specific different avenues that we have to place our money, whether it be 401ks or fixed income or annuities, have been a few of the recent discussions that we've had. While those tools are important, they do not constitute a plan. If somebody came to build that house and they said, hire me, I've got a hammer, versus somebody who comes and shows you a blueprint, there's probably one way you're going to lean more than another, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. You don't ask your drywaller to fix the furnace. You need a number of good tools, good skill sets to figure out, okay, well, how do we structure the income out of this? How do we structure the growth? How do we structure the estate plan? God forbid something happened. Many different processes to go through, to have some peace of mind that you certainly enjoy. You spent your entire life working to get to where you'll have some financial freedom. And, I got a good buddy of mine had passed away, and we were talking with his widow here not too long ago, and plenty of money and everything to get through retirement, no debt, nothing whatsoever, and plenty of assets, and still very nervous about it. So that's common. It's okay because, all of a sudden we're going from, getting a paycheck reliable and whatnot to, okay, do I have enough money to continue that paycheck on my own without my employer paying for it, and transitioning into Medicare, where you may have had employer sponsored health care, and some of the differences and nuances that come into play with all of these different facets of life, right? You're going into another chapter, or actually you're opening another book almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we go through different phases and big transitions in life, and certainly the passing of a spouse is one of those huge ones that may occur to us. But retirement, no different. It is a big transition in our phase of financial status and what all it takes. Well, we're going to be talking about that on today's program as we discuss how to structure for retirement success and confidence. And of course, to do that, you need a plan, ladies and gentlemen. And that's exactly what Chris McIntire and his team from McIntire Retirement Services make as an offer, an opportunity available to you as a part of this program and an extension of the information and education. They offer to actually put this into work and apply it to your situation. What does apply? What is appropriate? What could help benefit you financially in achieving your long-term goals? That's what the game plan for retirement is all about. Your goals in mind, long-term vision and outlook, diversified strategies for how to achieve them, and focusing on those pillars that we are going to have as the foundation in retirement. Income, investments, taxes, healthcare, legacy, all need to be addressed. Benefits that we are entitled to. And Chris will bring all of those pieces to the puzzle together into a cohesive, comprehensive picture and plan. If you'd like to take advantage of that offer, pick up the phone and give a call. 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. Chris, during our working career, the plan is set the alarm, wake up, show up to work, put in our efforts, our work, our skill, our sweat, earn that paycheck. And that takes care of a lot of the rest of the things. But we don't have that same residual recurring income in retirement. We have investments by that point in time. And when we have an income, we need investment planning. When we have investments, we need income planning. They balance each other out.
Yeah, good perspective there, Peter. And Ross and I work pretty hand in hand. solving these unknowns. So, somebody may say, hey, my expenses are $6,000 a month, but I've only got $3,000 a month in Social Security coming in. What's the best method to generate that additional $3,000 they need? And, probably need to adjust that for inflation. Obviously, things are, been to the gas station here, things are get more expensive, obviously.
They
They
are.
typically
Probably will continue to.
Yep, yep, absolutely. The nice thing is, we're in a pretty favorable tax environment now. So, most retirees are in a 10 or a 12% tax bracket, which gets you after all the deductions an income in there 120 to $140,000 range, plus or minus, depending on your age and some of the things that you get. So, taxes are a concern, but tax planning is probably a bigger concern for those of you with those 7-digit IRA accounts, and how we plan for taxes, how we plan for income, how we plan for growth, and just all these different subtexts, if you will, Peter.
Absolutely. Well, again, there are tools that are out there, but the tool does not constitute the plan. The builder of your house probably needs a hammer at a certain point in time, but if that's all they have, they're probably not the person that you hire as your general contractor to help you build your dream home. They would design a blueprint for you. And as we are talking about laying that foundation for the blueprint. Chris, how do we go about the process of, you mentioned that unknown of filling that income gap? How does that process look for somebody who is saying, well, now how do I retire and replace my paycheck and my income?
Yeah, exactly. And what's the best time to take Social Security? Because that's one of the key income pieces here. So we have some nice software that we can input all of the data in, and show people in real time. Obviously, when you get 25 years of seat time, you can see some of the stuff off the just by memory, but clients don't see that. So you have to treat every client like, look, this is the first time everybody's walking through this process and showing, okay, if inflation is 3%, here's how much more income we're going to need. If taxes increase, here's what we're going to need. If your spouse predeceases you, early in retirement, this is what that looks like. So, having software programs that can show that in real time allows us to implement the tools that we can utilize or solutions to hedge these problems. Long-term care to, especially on the income planning side, are we going to add an annuity? Are we going to use structured notes? Are we going to use a combination, which is very common because, if you want to solve a problem, wouldn't you like to have multiple solutions to get to that conclusion instead of relying on just one trick, if you will?
Chris, I know that building a home and looking at that foundation in North Carolina, where I'm from, there's a lot of different types of soil. There's sandy soil out toward the coast. There's some clay soil in the Piedmont, and then there's rock and granite out toward the mountains. And for each of those different types of soil, a different type of foundation, different depth, different material, different construction might be needed. And my analogy here is that yes, you've seen it before and know some of these processes, but the individual person is going to play into how this is structured. One person might need $3,000 a month, another person might need $15,000 a month. And are the people that you talk to really aware of what they are spending or are going to need in retirement? Because I have to imagine that a lot of the folks that you talk to might have earned a pretty comfortable kind of income and may not have paid as much attention to pinching every penny and stretching every dollar and where each and every dollar went. So might not pay as much attention to the budget on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis.
Yeah, yeah, good point there, Peter. And I would say, a shout out to the engineers listening today. Not everybody has a spreadsheet for everything. We say that with all,
Spreadsheets for my spreadsheets, Chris.
yep, multicolored and all of that. Yeah, we get that. Some folks are, just have been used to living within their means, And, so they know, approximately what their expenses are. They know what their income is coming in. And it's nice when, we do reviews with clients and they say, we're living within our means. We've actually got more money coming in than what's going out. And, like right now, the markets have been very favorable to, most investors out there, stock markets I'm referring to, Peter. And, so like I had meetings this week where I told clients, I'm like, look, if you're going to do something, let's do it now. If you need that new vehicle, you've made that kind of money right now. If you're going to take that trip to Europe or to Hawaii, for example, or whatever, said this is a good time to do that. So, you have to have some of that flexibility when it comes to, where your spending is going to be. You want to spend more money when the markets are being favorable to you than when they're, when they can be, I'll use the term punishing.
Do you find, Chris, that when the direction of money changes, and in other words, we've got a paycheck coming in, we're spending comfortably, we're covering our bills, we're taking those vacations, we're buying cars when we want them or need them, but when the paycheck stops, does the psychology change there that people tend to tighten up a little bit naturally? Or in the first couple of years of retirement, do we tend to go a little hog wild on the whole other end of the spectrum and risk overspending?
Yeah, and with our broad client base, several hundred people, I got one that comes to mind. He said, and him and his wife are like, look, these are our go years right now. We're going to be spending more money in the first 5 years of our retirement to do some dream trips and things that we had worked our whole lives to. Okay. Some other folks may say, look, we're just going to be real cautious. We're not big travelers. We're not looking to, buy a new house or anything. We're pretty content. And then, we get things always in the middle there. So, the extreme is, somebody retires and they say, hey, we're going to spend $150,000 a year in the first 5 years of our retirement because here's our bucket list. Okay. When we're in our 80s, we're not going to be spending anything. Hopefully, if they're not in a nursing home or something like that, and they've got required minimum distributions from the IRA accounts, they probably have more money coming in than they could possibly spend because if you stay at home and aren't eating out 3 times a day, what are you really spending the money on? Property taxes and, your basic house expenses. And for most folks, ideally your Social Security covers the bulk of that in middle America.
Chris, I actually heard a really scary, just kind of stat or math equation. Whatever you want to call it, but like if you've got a married couple wanting to eat 3 meals a day, on average $10 a meal, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for 25 or 30 years of retirement. Like, do the math on that. And that alone adds up to like over $500,000 that's going to be spent just on food. And again, we've got to structure all of this into our retirement. During our working career, Chris, we had a structure for the investments. Most of us who've reached a level of success structured that in somewhere where automatically there's a certain amount that is going into and towards those investments for each and every paycheck or every week or every month, what have you. And we take advantage of this phenomenon of dollar cost averaging as a result. But I also know that you've talked about the opposite effect of sequence of returns risk. When money is coming out, there's an equal and opposite force on the portfolio. Is that something that you specifically address and try to help your clients structure against?
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. We always talk about a safe money strategy on the show typically every week, and we don't want to discount that. This year it's been wonderful. The stock market has done incredibly well. There are years like in 2022 where stocks and bonds both fell double digits, significantly with all those rising interest rates. Man, that punishes investors. Thankfully, in 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026, the AI spending and all that has really driven up stock prices. So it's been rewarding. But, you know, to refresh people's memory, we haven't gone through a serious recession, like we did in from 2000 to 2002. We had the financial crisis in '08. The government came in with massive amounts of money. The same thing during COVID. So I would say the vast majority of people out there listening to the show today, Forget all about 2000 to 2002. We all get greedy, when the market's running, I want to get a little bit more. But when do you pull back a little bit and create a safe money strategy for yourselves? And ideally, you'd want to have that in place before you're retired because you don't want to do your retirement planning, all right, well, I just turned 65, I retired, I'm going on Medicare. What's my retirement plan? You want to know that years ahead of time so that you're hedging these risks. And longevity is one of the risks that you have to hedge if you're going to live. My dad's 93 years old and doing fantastic. You know,
Yeah, well,
my mom's.
not a hope or a prayer or a guess or a whim. Again, we want some structure to this. Chris, going back to your example of the two different clients, one that has some travel ambitions and wants to take care of that bucket list. I know there's a difference between like subsistence level expenses, survival, essential expenses, and then discretionary expenses, like doing those bucket list type of items and travel. How much of the discretionary side of our income do you put into that safe money strategy or that safe income planning structure?
Yeah, you definitely want to have enough in there that can get you through, several, 2 years, let's say, of a funny type of market cycle, or an alternative income strategy as well. So when we say safe money strategy, there's a number of different tools and things that we can structure this strategy around. Some people need that additional annuity income. Some people may use a CD or a money market or a fixed annuity, just for some safe dollars coming up down the road. And, you've heard the term laddering out bonds, laddering out CDs, laddering out annuities. Those would be examples of how to structure a safe money strategy, Peter.
Once again, we are talking with Chris McIntire, president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services. Questions about your money, your investments, your finance, your plan for retirement, or if you'd like to get a plan for retirement put together or reviewed, pick up the phone and you are welcome to give them a call. He loves to hear from folks and help in any way he can. 419-332-0532, the number to call. McIntire Retirement Services, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532. Chris, we've all sort of been trained. We've heard, we've been hardwired. It's been taught to us that we take more risk to get more reward. And certainly that has paid off over the last decade and a half, really since the Great Recession. We've seen some blips, but overall, taking that risk has been beneficial and advantageous and given us some forward progress. But in retirement, is there a point in time where lowering the risk can actually increase the probability of success? And do you talk about whether or not that is part of the structure for retirement?
Yeah, Peter, I'm glad you bring this one up here because I was going there and you fed me right into this. I remember being at a conference with Brookstone and we had some gentlemen from JP Morgan, for example, they're investment bankers. And when you think of JP Morgan, you're thinking of stocks and growth and whatnot, and they had illustrations showing that having a 60% portfolio in stocks, 40% in bonds, it was that generic, okay? And drawing income out of that held up better than 100% in stocks because of that drawdown risk or that sequence of returns risk that we had talked about. Because, if you had $1 million and you're pulling 4% out of that and the market falls by 30%, now you got 700,000 and you're pulling out, dang near 6%. And that's that drawdown sequence of return risk. So, yeah, actually having some different income strategies versus growth strategies, and there's nothing wrong with having both of them in place. That's what we're trying to get across to folks here today is, well, look, when you're trying to draw income, what got you to retirement might not be the same piece that gets you through retirement with some peace of mind.
But in fact, Chris, you want to have both sides of that equation, right? The growth and the stability and probability. Maybe during our income years, the stability and probability is us. It's our paycheck earning ability. But in retirement, we've got to have a little bit of balance of both of those, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And personally, my wife and I have a fair amount of money outside of an IRA account, and I use preferred stock funds just to spin off some dividends in there. That's the growth, but that's my structure of my safe piece right now. And then I've got my tech sector and all those things for the growth side. So yeah, I certainly have a safe strategy in place, more than one actually.
Well, again, we are talking about structuring for retirement success. And Chris, you mentioned taxes earlier. During our working career, taxes actually relatively simple. I mean, still a pain, but they're taken out of our paycheck before we see it. We reconcile it when we file our tax return. But in retirement, all of that changes as well. Do we need to have some knowledge of a specific structure for taxes in retirement, being that we've got multiple sources of income, Social Security, pensions, withdrawals, IRAs, Roths, regular money, and they're all taxed a little bit differently, and it's up to us to understand that and reconcile it ourselves?
Yep, it really is. A lot of today's retirement planning is do it yourself unless you're hiring somebody to help you walk through walk through all of these, let's call it the minefield, if you will. You don't
More
want to step on,
complicated, certainly, like a
yeah,
lot of complications.
yeah. You step on the required minimum distribution, landmine. You step in the Medicare premium increase landmine. You step into, you know, um, the pre-59 and a half rule for some folks. I got a client, he's not 59 and a half yet and retired. And, he's got to get to 59 and a half so he can make penalty-free withdrawals. So, we did some special planning for him on that regard when we initiated a rollover. We had to leave some money outside so he can get by the next 12 months, for example.
Certainly, not only more complications, but Chris, in retirement, I mean, we have been told we will be in a lower tax bracket or environment once we retire. Maybe we're not seeing that as much, although we've got this additional Social Security deduction now, which is nice for those who are 65 plus and qualified. But a lot of times our deductions are gone by the time we get to retirement. Some of the ones that at least we've been used to, like kids in the home and mortgage interest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had the one big beautiful bill got passed, and that gave some additional exemptions and deductions, but those can be taken away just as easy as they've been added as, the elected officials make their legislative changes as well. And we're facing a pretty steep deficit. We've got some Social Security and Medicare funding challenges, and it's not like the government opens up a factory and creates goods and services to create money. They get it through us through, taxation of one form or another, or they spend less money. And we all know that's not something that they've trademarked.
Yeah. You've mentioned healthcare as well. Chris, our healthcare coverage for routine kind of things through Medicare, that's relatively structured. We've got, kind of one chance a year to maybe review our plan and update that, but the costs are kind of set across the board. But medical risks certainly aren't, and not everything is covered through Medicare. And that's why we need to have a plan and a structure to cover uncovered medical expenses as well.
Yeah, and be prepared for those to change as time goes on as well. My wife is on Medicare right now, and the lot of differences between the traditional insurance she had with Medical Mutual to her Medicare plan that she has with Medical Mutual. And where do some of your medical devices have to come from? Like she has a sugar monitor from, as Peter would know, from a previous issue. And as soon as she turned on to Medicare, she went into Walmart to get it refilled for next to nothing. They said, "Oh, you're on Medicare now. It has to be ordered through this company, and they ship it from California." It's like, yeah, it would have been nice to know that, but so she had to buy one on her own until that transition came. So there's all these surprises. And some of you who are listening to the show today, you may have not paid hardly anything for your health insurance premiums in your working year. You're going to retire, eventually transition into Medicare. They're going to pull at least $210 a month out of your Social Security, okay, for Part B. you might pay another $200 a month for the supplement, what Medicare doesn't cover, and then maybe another $200 a month for your Part D, your prescriptions and whatnot. So, you might have gone from nothing to $600 a month times two for a husband and wife. And, I say that paying $1,300 a month, and Peter's self-employed. I'm sure he pays a fair amount for his family as well.
Yeah, and we plan for that now, Chris. There's a new commercial on TV that I don't know is in my mind for some reasons. We're talking about this. A couple's in the woods and they come into a clearing and there's thousands of bears there. And it says, "Well, that's unexpected." And then the guy smacks himself because he's being swarmed by mosquitoes. And they said, "But some things can be expected. Prepare for the expected." And I feel like there are some things in retirement that if we are, knowledgeable about it, can pretty much be expected. And yet still people are not planning and preparing for them, like the need for income, like the taxes, like the healthcare premiums. And another big one that comes to mind is the eventual passing of a spouse. I mean, you've mentioned that already as well, but like the decisions that we're making at 62 or 65 as we are entering into retirement ultimately are going to have impacts potentially beyond our own lifetime. And spousal income dependency is something that might be classified under an expectation, could be expected, but a lot of people don't prepare for it still.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't mind sharing some of our personal planning that we do because it should benefit everybody. My wife and I have an estate plan that includes a trust. Okay. We have long-term care protection in case we go into a nursing home. I have, life insurance in case something happens to me. So does my wife. And then we have our investments that include safe money strategies, growth strategies. So, we've tried to make contingencies for about everything that you can because, life is what happens to plans, right?
Yeah, well, Chris, I know that once upon a time you were a high school and college kid, and then in a different profession in a former lifetime, half a lifetime ago. At what point in your life did you start to make this transition? I mean, you're sharing personally here, and understand why it was so important to structure for these protections and to have these things in place to help to structure for and predict retirement success for not only yourself, but I'm sure as you got into doing this for other people, you saw it as well.
Yes, and it's the years of sitting in this chair right here and seeing all the different experiences of the clients that did it right, the clients that didn't do it so right, family experiences. Robin's dad has passed away. We cared for a dear friend of ours, with a cognitive disorder for over 5 years. So we know about paying caregivers. My mom's in a nursing home right now. We know about Medicaid, and that again, a lot of us are smart when we're young, but you get wise as you get old because you've been through the experiences. And Peter dyes his hair. I do not. So I
I do
do have
not.
some
I
gray
do
in there.
not, Chris. Thank you. But I do have a little bit of time as well, seeing what has worked and what has not. And I do understand that all of this takes planning and coordination, understanding how to structure for income, investments, taxes, healthcare, legacy. All of these are critically important, ladies and gentlemen. And you can do some of that along the way, but even those pre-retirement years are critical. And that's why it's always good to be proactive. We call it planning, not financial reacting, financial planning, looking ahead and planning out and mapping out and structuring how to maintain a level of comfort, confidence, and success. And that's what the game plan for retirement, your game plan for retirement, is all about, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to get that put together, pick up the phone and give Chris McIntire Retirement Services a call, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532. You can also visit online, McIntyreRetirementServices.com, McIntyreRetirementServices.com. And Chris, I do not dye my hair. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Yep. And as Peter knows, we're getting ready to roll out a brand new website here. So keep looking at McIntyre Retirement Services. And thanks for listening, everybody. Be safe out there and may God bless America.
Tune into Chris McIntyre's full radio program and visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntyre. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.